Greetings, vinyl community. This video is a response to a video posted today by Parlogram, a channel that regularly posts very detailed and scholarly deep dives into aspects of the Beatles discography. Parlogram, the name seems to be a portmanteau of parlophone and polygram, the record labels. Well, this week's topic was a well-worn one. It was the perennial parlor game or mental exercise of creating a single LP version of the Beatles' White Album. This is my White Album, which is a German direct metal master pressing. I think this is a really superb sounding version of the White Album. It's a Pressung Weiß. As you can see, it is on lovely, pristine white vinyl. Very conceptual. So this topic has always irked me, and I want to talk a little about why I think that a perfect single-disc white album is a contradiction in terms. Now, Andrew, the channel's presenter, looked at two different metrics for cutting the original 30-track album in half and compiling a 15-track single LP. The first was a survey made by fans playing this same game in social media, in internet forums and fan sites over the past 20 years, and Andrew collated nearly 200 of these responses. Now, a sample size of 200 may seem a bit paltry for an album that has sold 14 million copies over the years, but we don't need a scientifically accurate assessment. I've always said that one of the chief arguments against cutting the album down to a single LP is that when you look at these polls, they're all over the place. You naturally see a wide variety of choices. No one can agree on which songs to cut, well then they can't be all that disposable. But even with a sample of just 200, we do see a general consensus emerging. And incidentally, the option of adding Hey Jude or the single version of Revolution or one of the outtakes like Not Guilty instead of one of the genuine White Album tracks was not permitted in Parlogram's version of the exercise. Andrew also looked at a list. So what Andrew did with this was he made a spreadsheet and determined the 15 most popular songs, and then he personally arranged them into what he thought was a good running order, which was fairly conservative. He didn't stray too far from the original album. Mostly he grouped the songs together that are grouped together on the original. The first three songs were the first three songs on the original album, all of which made the cut. He also looked at a list of the and I will leave a link to the Parlogram video so you'll be able to see the exact running orders. He also looked at a list of the most streamed songs on Spotify, which produced a list of mostly the same songs, but with a few differences. The most notable being that Obladi, which didn't even make the first list, was the third most popular song in Spotify streaming. And as he points out, the big difference between the first list that he compiled and the second made from Spotify is that the Spotify list probably skewed younger. And I think that a lot of the people who are listening to Obladi Oblada on Spotify, who are younger people, are doing so because they know the song Why Don't You Get a Job by the Offsprings, and they've heard that it's a ripoff of a Beatles song called Obladi Oblada, so they got introduced to the song that way. That's just my conjecture. So what you mainly get on these lists is the pretty songs, the acoustic songs like Julia and Blackbird, and the kick-ass rock and roll songs like Back in the USSR and Helter Skelter, and you get the psychedelic whimsy of Glass Onion, and of course you get While My Guitar Gently Weeps, because that one is epic. That's always a popular favorite, a lot of people's number one on the album. And you also get a distinct sense that people favor the earlier parts of the album. Not one song from side 4 made either list. So side 4 of the White Album is Revolution 1, Honey Pie, Savoy Truffle, Cry Baby Cry, Revolution 9, and Good Night. So people want to make a single disc White Album without any of those songs. I think it's a matter of people kind of favor the songs at the beginning of the album because their attention starts to wander after they've been listening to a 90-minute album. What you don't get in these lists is a good sense of the album's weirdness. And that is a shame, because this gleaming white album is, ironically, the Beatles' darkest album. There are a lot of spooky atmospheres here, and they get sanitized away when you whittle the album down to just its most popular tracks, the proper song tracks. How is it still the White Album if it isn't punctuated by these strange little short bits that are hardly songs at all, like Wild Honey Pie, or Why Don't We Do It in the Road, or the mysterious fragment that is Can You Take Me Back Where I Came From? It may be a tight collection of songs, but it no longer has the very identity of the White Album. It no longer has the character of the White Album. The whole sprawling nature of the double set is essential to what the White Album is. And look at some of the things that get left off. Long, Long, Long. I think that is one of the most deeply moving things in the whole Beatles canon. It is a song of great delicacy and yearning beauty, and it is also very eerie in its sheer sound, and it builds to something downright frightening at the very end. And Cry Baby Cry is whimsical and nostalgic, kind of a childhood Alice in Wonderland fantasy, but it's also something kind of disturbing. Like Alice in Wonderland, there's something hard to get your head around. John seems to be telling us only bits of the story, leaving us to wonder what's really going on at the local bird and bee. And there's something quite menacing about Savoy Truffle, where George manages to make a toothache sound like a matter of life and death. Well, there's no room for any of these on this single disc White Album that we're hearing about. And then there's Revolution 9. Now, I'll get a lot of kickback for this, but in my opinion, Revolution 9 is one of the most important things on the White Album. It is a brilliantly constructed work of musique concrète. It's perfectly worthy of standing beside the academically accepted works of musique concrète, the works of the Stockhausens and the Pierre-Henrys. It is deep, it is funny, it is scary, it is fascinating. And its position in the backwaters of the White Album is a crucial part of the White Album experience. It's absolutely part of the trip. It's set up by the dreamlike quality of Cry Baby Cry, and it's resolved on a comforting swell of billowing orchestration in the lushly retro sounds of good old Uncle Ringo bidding us good night. Some people say, yeah, well, that may be, but it still doesn't belong on a Beatles album. John should have put it on one of his albums, like Two Virgins. And the thing about an album like Two Virgins, or, the Wedding Album, the things where John did his experimental side or displayed his experimental side at length, is that Two Virgins is really not very good. John captured the lightning in Revolution 9, but it's just not the same thing. Two Virgins sounds a lot like exactly what it is. It's an album that was banged out in one night. and I use the word banged advisedly. Hi, Yoko. It doesn't have the depth of Revolution 9. It doesn't have the attention to detail. It doesn't have the storyline. There's a lot going on in Revolution 9, and it takes you from segment to segment in a very compelling way, which doesn't happen on John's other attempts at doing this kind of thing. This really does deserve its place on a Beatles album. It is 8 minutes long, and it's going to try the patience of people who have no use for avant-garde music to begin with. And you wouldn't want to include 8 minutes of that on a single LP. It belongs in the backwaters of a double LP, exactly where it is. So, Andrew did have the good sense to give the last word to Mr. Paul McCartney, and I'm going to give the last word to Mr. Paul McCartney too. I'm not going to try to include the clip because I don't know if I have the legal right to do that. He managed to, but Paul said about the exercise of carving down the White Album, "What do you mean? It was great, it's sold, it's the bloody Beatles White Album. Shut up." So I'm going to shut up. Thank you very much for watching. Be well. Talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.